Okay, so if you're someone who has, meticulously planned out a new fitness routine, you bought the gear, you prepped all the healthy meals for a week.
Right, you've done everything you're supposed to do.
Exactly. And then you watch all that enthusiasm and all that effort just vanish almost overnight.
Yeah.
And you're left feeling frustrated and thinking, okay, I'll start over again next Monday.
Oh, the next Monday cycle.
If that sounds familiar, then this deep dive is absolutely custom built for you.
That really is the central conflict in modern fitness, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that huge gap between having what feels like perfect knowledge and actually achieving lasting, consistent action.
You're swimming in information.
Totally. We know the macros, the best compound lifts, all of it. Yet the failure rates are still astronomically high. We tend to treat fitness like an information problem when it's really a deeply rooted behavioral and psychological one.
Absolutely. And that's why we're tackling fitness today, but through a completely unexpected lens. Our source material is the summary and analysis of Brian Keane's book, The Fitness Mindset.
A fantastic book.
And it's not about workout splits or the calorie count of kale. It's a deep forensic examination of why so many of us know what to do but still can't sustain it. It treats the journey as a mental game first and a physical 1 second.
And what's so fascinating here is that the whole approach is psychology-based. It's about habit formation, identity theory. It's not about ephemeral hype.
Right.
It just ditches the fad diets and the extreme workout regimes. Instead, it offers a practical, realistic framework that really applies to everyone.
Beginner or advanced athlete.
Exactly. Whether you're a beginner who's just overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice or an advanced athlete stuck on a plateau, the book focuses on building an internal operating system that actually lasts.
So our mission today is to distill those core psychological frameworks, the behavioral science that Keane uses to get these long-term sustainable results. We're really aiming for those aha moments. Yeah, that click. The moment you realize why every diet you tried before didn't stick, why the enthusiasm always faded, and why you ended up back where you started. We want to stop blaming the program and start looking at the programming inside our own heads.
And the book's core premise is, in its own way, revolutionary because it's so simple, but it's profound. Lasting fitness transformation begins when you stop chasing that short-term perfection.
Which is impossible.
Totally impossible. And you start building permanent identity-based habits instead. It completely flips the script from temporary effort to permanent change.
That sounds like a heavy lift, but I guess if we can unpack the mechanisms, it should make the whole process feel lighter.
It does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the root cause of fitness failure, according to Keane. We have to understand the mental traps we all fall into before we can build a system to escape them.
Exactly. Keane starts by arguing that the vast majority of people fail, not because of external stuff like a bad workout plan or a flawed diet sheet, which are, everywhere.
Right. Good ones are easy to find.
The real reason is these pervasive, poor thinking patterns that are just endemic to how we approach goals. The mental scaffolding is weak, so no matter how much discipline you try to pile on top, it collapses.
And these thinking patterns, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure, don't they?
Absolutely.
Let's delve into the 4 big traps he highlights. The first one is a real killer, not just in fitness, but everywhere. The all-or-nothing thinking trap.
This is such a classic cognitive distortion. It's the idea that if you can't be 100% perfect, the entire effort is just nullified. It's void.
The psychological mechanism there is rigidity.
Right, total rigidity. Because the system has zero flexibility, one tiny slip-up feels catastrophic. You've mentally put yourself in one of 2 boxes. You're either on the diet or off the diet. There's no in between.
This scenario is just painfully familiar. You plan to eat clean all day, you're doing great, and then there's an unplanned slice of pizza at an office party.
And in that all-or-nothing mindset, that single deviation, that one data point, becomes the permission slip to derail everything.
Yeah, the internal voice just says,
well, I've already blown it today. The effort's ruined. Might as well finish the pizza, order dessert, and binge watch TV until Monday morning.
And that's the paradox of perfection. If your own rules demand 0 mistakes, you are guaranteed to fail. Because we're human, our lives are messy, and mistakes are just inevitable.
That rigidity creates such intense, unbearable internal pressure that quitting actually becomes the only form of relief.
I think so many people miss that connection. They blame their lack of willpower, but it's actually the ridiculous standard they've set for their willpower that's the real problem. And that links directly to the second trap he talks about, short-term motivation.
Motivation. It's so fleeting because it's an emotion, right? It's driven by novelty or some external thing, a New Year's resolution, a wedding, a health scare.
It gives you that huge burst of energy on day one.
A massive burst. But we know from psychology that emotions fluctuate wildly. So relying purely on that initial enthusiasm is just a setup for guaranteed failure. The moment that feeling dips, and it always does.
Oh yeah, around day 10 for me.
Usually around day 10 or 14, when the novelty wears off, the whole program just collapses because there's no underlying system holding it all up.
So if motivation fails and your whole plan is based on that temporary emotional energy, where do people often turn for comfort? The third trap, emotional eating.
Yes, using food not as fuel for physical hunger, but as a tool to manage difficult feelings. Stress, sadness, boredom, avoidance.
Let's get a bit more technical there. What's happening in the body?
So when stress hits, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and it triggers the release of cortisol, our main stress hormone. High cortisol levels often crank up our appetite, specifically for those hyper-palatable, calorie-dense comfort foods.
The stuff that gives you that instant gratification.
Exactly. It signals to our primitive brain that resources are plentiful, even if the environment feels threatening or stressful.
So it's not just a lack of discipline, it's this ancient evolutionary wiring responding to a modern stressor, like a bad day at work.
Precisely. Food becomes a momentary chemical distraction from an unresolved emotional state. Keane really emphasizes that until you address the root cause, the boredom, the anxiety, the stress, no amount of calorie counting is going to solve the problem long term.
You're just treating the symptom, which is the overeating, while totally ignoring the cause.
The emotional dysregulation. Yeah.
And that brings us to the final trap, which catches so many driven, high-achieving people. Unrealistic expectations.
Oh, this one is huge. Setting these monumental goals that are just destined to cause intense frustration and quitting within weeks. Demanding rapid linear fat loss, for example.
Expectations force you into unsustainable efforts.
Totally. When people start a program, they often try to compensate for months or even years of inactivity. By pushing for a massive immediate payoff, they create this huge energy and mental debt.
But biology doesn't work that way.
Biology is slow. Muscle gain and fat loss are slow processes. So when the body doesn't deliver that dramatic, visible result on the exact timescale you expected, the disappointment is so overwhelming that you just quit. The mind interprets the lack of quick perfection as proof that the program, or worse, that you are a failure.
If we connect all this back to the bigger picture, this is why Keane argues that fitness needs a strong psychological foundation. If your thinking is broken, if you're stuck in that all-or-nothing cycle, and you're just relying on motivation,
the behavior will always fail. It doesn't matter how perfect the workout or diet plan is on paper.
It really resonates with people who are chronic dieters. The analysis we have noted that one of the strongest reader comments was, "Finally explains why I keep quitting."
It gives you the language to understand that internal struggle. And that's where the real battle is.
And that acknowledgement of the internal struggle moves us perfectly into the next section, where Keane really addresses the flaw in traditional approaches and why focusing on the external program is just fundamentally the wrong place to start.
Indeed. We had to talk about the idea that the programs themselves are often designed for failure because they just fundamentally misunderstand human psychology.
Let's break down the 3 big flaws in traditional approaches that the source material points out. First up, extreme diets are unsustainable.
They're built on radical restriction and deprivation. And while they might give you rapid initial results, which is mostly just water weight,
right,
they trigger this powerful biological and psychological rebellion. Biologically, restriction signals famine to your body, so it adapts your metabolism and cranks up hunger hormones. And psychologically, when you ban entire food groups, you just elevate the perceived desirability of those foods.
The forbidden fruit effect.
Totally. It just sets the stage for inevitable compensatory binges the second the diet is over. They teach you how to starve for a little while, not how to eat properly for a lifetime.
The second flaw is what we just touched on. Motivation is temporary. It's a fantastic starting pistol, but it's a terrible fuel source for a marathon.
You just can't rely on an emotional state to sustain a behavior that needs to last for years or decades.
Motivation is great for that first week.
Yeah, when you're feeling that rush of novelty. But what happens when you're tired, you're stressed, and that initial glow has faded? If the only reason you go to the gym is because you feel motivated, you will consistently fail to show up on the days you need it most.
The days when stress is highest and the temptation to quit is strongest. And the third flaw is absolutely crucial in behavioral science. Willpower is limited.
This is a core concept, often called ego depletion. Research suggests willpower is a finite mental resource. It gets tired with use.
So think of it like a battery.
Exactly. Every time you have to consciously talk yourself out of checking your phone or resist an urge or force yourself to do a hard task, you drain that battery. If your entire fitness plan depends on you having maxed out willpower every single day to resist cravings, you're going to crack.
You're just setting yourself up for self-sabotage. If we know willpower is finite, then relying on it to make dozens of good decisions every single day is just a recipe for crashing that battery halfway through the week.
And that realization is the key transition point. Keane's work demands this fundamental philosophical shift. Instead of pouring energy into managing the tactical failures caused by limited willpower, we have to change the whole operating procedure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Keane flips the fundamental quotient of fitness. He forces us to look inward for the solution.
The traditional external question, the one that focuses on tactics, is always, what diet should I follow? What workout plan is best?
But the identity question, the one that leads to sustainable change, is radically different. What kind of person do I need to become? Who do I want to be?
This identity shift is everything. It is the foundational concept that protects you from all the pitfalls we just talked about. If we dig into key Lesson 2 identity shapes, behavior Keane is tapping into some powerful psychological forces.
So when you genuinely start to see yourself as a healthy person or a runner or someone who prioritizes nutrition, the whole mechanism of choice changes.
It changes completely.
Okay, I get the concept, but let's challenge that a little. People say they want to be that person, but they don't know how to bridge the gap. How does just changing an internal label actually make a practical difference when the pizza's sitting right there?
That's a great point. And the mechanism is rooted in reducing what's called cognitive dissonance.
Which is?
Cognitive dissonance is the mental stress or discomfort you feel when you hold contradictory beliefs. Or, and this is the key part here, when you perform actions that contradict your own self-image.
So if I identify as a healthy person, but then I choose the path of least resistance, I skip the gym, I eat the junk food, that creates an internal conflict.
Precisely. If you identify as someone who runs, skipping a run feels fundamentally uncomfortable. It feels like you're violating your own sense of self. It actually becomes easier to make the positive choice because that choice is now an automatic expression of your identity, not some exhausting act of willpower you have to fight against your desire for comfort.
So the decision to choose water over soda isn't a battle fought with that finite willpower battery.
No, it's simply what the person you are is already programmed to do.
So we're essentially outsourcing the decision-making process to our chosen identity. You aren't forcing yourself to do the healthy thing. You're just being the healthy person.
It shifts the effort from constantly fighting against who you are to simply living up to who you claim to be. This is why Keane argues that true sustainability hinges on this internal shift. If you are a person who prioritizes movement, missing the gym feels like a deviation from your core self, not just some momentary indulgence.
This identity concept is the very definition of a system that outlasts fleeting motivation, which brings us right to key lesson 1. Consistency motivation. Motivation might get you to buy the running shoes, but the system, the one rooted in your identity, is what gets you out the door when it's pouring rain.
We have to clearly differentiate the two. Motivation is like a shot of adrenaline. It's powerful, but it's short-lived. A system, on the other hand, is the structural infrastructure.
The recurring patterns.
The patterns, the cues, the environment, all the things that keep the desired action happening long after the initial excitement is gone.
Can you elaborate on how a system handles that inevitable dip in enthusiasm where motivation just fails?
Sure. When you rely on motivation, the question is always, do I feel like working out? If the answer is no, which it is most days for most people, you fail. But when you rely on a system, that question is replaced by an operating procedure. It's 6:10 p.m. on Tuesday. I put on my gym clothes and I walk out the door. The action is completely decoupled from the emotion.
Even if you just get there and stretch for 15 minutes.
Even then, you've upheld the system and reinforced the identity of a person who shows up. The consistency of that low-effort action is vastly more valuable than the intensity of a high-effort action you only do once every 3 weeks.
And this is exactly why this book is so valuable, no matter how fitness trends change. It offers fewer detailed workout plans because it's teaching you how to think, not just what to do.
Yes.
If you can successfully adopt the identity of a disciplined person, you can plug in any new diet or training program that comes out 5 years from now, and your internal engine will just execute it consistently.
You're building the durable internal operating system first, and then just updating the applications later. If the mind is weak, the strongest external program is going to crash and burn. This whole approach gives a clear, actionable alternative for anyone listening who is just tired of relying on temporary enthusiasm. It moves the conversation toward permanent shifts in personality.
Right. And one of the most fraught areas where this identity shift from what to who is so critical is our relationship with food. We have to train our minds to interact with food in a sustainable, non-judgmental way. Let's transition now into section 3, the psychology of eating.
This is where we see that awareness over restriction philosophy really come into full focus. Keane recognizes that for so many people, the failure of fitness is really a failure of managing their eating habits, which are often just deeply tangled with emotion, culture, and past trauma.
He outlines several key areas where the mind just dominates our food choices, starting with that fundamental distinction between emotional versus physical hunger. For someone listening, how do we practically tell the difference in the moment?
It definitely takes practice, but the differences are pretty clear. Physical hunger is gradual. It comes on slowly over hours. It's nonspecific. An apple or a sandwich would satisfy it. And it's accompanied by physical signs like your stomach growling.
Emotional hunger, on the other hand.
It's sudden. It's often intense, and it demands specific, immediate comfort foods, usually things high in sugar, fat, or salt. And crucially, emotional hunger often hits right after a meal or when your body clearly isn't physically deprived.
And most importantly, emotional hunger is usually followed by regret or shame, whereas physical hunger is followed by simple satiety, just feeling full.
Exactly. Keane teaches you to employ a pause. Just stop and identify the source of the craving. Is this a physiological signal for energy? Or is this an emotional signal demanding comfort or distraction or avoidance?
And often those emotional signals are directly tied to his second point, the link between stress, boredom, and food consumption.
We talked about cortisol, but let's look at boredom. Boredom is such a common trap because our brains are inherently novelty-seeking. Eating provides quick, easy sensory stimulation, the texture, the smell, the taste, when our brain is just craving input or engagement.
It temporarily fills a cognitive gap.
Perfectly put. If you're bored sitting at your desk, going to the pantry is just a low-friction way to get a little dopamine hit. It's much easier than finding a challenging task to do.
So the food is being used as a quick fix for a non-food problem, a lack of engagement or emotional dysregulation.
Exactly. So managing this means finding alternative non-food coping mechanisms for those states. Distraction, movement, a few controlled breaths.
And the third major hurdle is one that the diet industry has capitalized on for decades: the damaging impact of social pressure and guilt cycles. Fitness culture so often applies a moral weight to food. Food is clean or dirty, good or bad.
This moralization is just devastating because it inherently leads to those crippling guilt cycles we talked about earlier. If you eat a piece of bad food, you instantly feel like a bad person or a person who failed.
And that emotional distress then triggers the need for more comfort.
Which, ironically, leads you to eat more bad food to cope with the shame. It's a textbook, self-perpetuating loop of self-sabotage that is just constantly reinforced by cultural messaging.
So, if restriction and morality are the problem, then the solution Keane champions has to be awareness over restriction.
This is the therapeutic breakthrough for so many readers. Think about the psychology of restriction. If you consciously tell yourself you absolutely cannot have cookies, you inevitably elevate the value and the desirability of that cookie. It becomes the forbidden fruit.
And when your willpower inevitably drops,
the resulting binge is often far larger and more destructive than the moderate single serving you would have naturally eaten if you hadn't restricted it so heavily in the first place.
Awareness, on the other hand, allows for an informed, conscious choice. You acknowledge the craving is there, you understand why it's there, and then you choose how to respond, allowing for controlled moderation.
It's not about fighting the craving with sheer grit. It's about observing the craving and managing the environment around it. Keane teaches readers to manage the triggers instead of just fighting off cravings once they arrive. This is called upstream thinking.
Okay, give us a practical example of upstream versus downstream thinking in the kitchen.
Downstream thinking is when you're standing in front of the open fridge, exhausted after a stressful day, trying desperately to use willpower to stop yourself from grabbing the leftovers.
We've all been there.
Upstream thinking means that on Sunday, You already made sure there are zero tempting, high-friction foods easily accessible. If the ice cream tub is the first thing you see, that's poor upstream management. If the only things easily visible are pre-cut vegetables and hummus, you've managed the trigger and you've outsourced your willpower.
That makes perfect sense. And this connects directly to key lesson 4. Food is not the enemy. That shift in framing is just crucial for mental health and fitness.
When you view food purely through a lens of morality, failure is guaranteed. But when you view food as fuel, energy, and a source of pleasure that needs to be balanced against your activity levels, then a high-calorie meal is just a larger energy intake that day.
It's not a moral failing that requires immediate penance or a 10-mile run tomorrow.
Exactly. This reframing allows for sustainable flexibility.
This segment clearly resonates with the chronic dieter, offering a completely new perspective. The review analysis we saw mentioned changed my relationship with food. And that's the ultimate goal here, divorcing food from shame and reintroducing balance.
And this realization that mental strength dictates our behavior around food and movement transitions perfectly into the overall concept that mental strength itself is trainable, just like a physical muscle. We have to dedicate time to training the mind like a muscle.
So we've established that discipline is essential, but Keane's idea of discipline isn't about being miserable and forcing yourself through pain. It's about creating an infrastructure that makes the healthy choice the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Let's start with the internal environment, the impact of self-talk on performance and adherence. How you internally narrate your challenges determines whether you spiral into that all-or-nothing failure loop or you just gently self-correct.
So if you slip up and your internal dialogue is harsh, you're lazy, you always quit, you ruined everything, that toxic self-talk confirms the negative identity, I am a failure, and just ensures you quit. You active validate your own label.
The alternative is pragmatic, coaching self-talk. If you miss a workout, the self-talk should be something like, okay, I missed yesterday, that's data, my schedule was overloaded, I'll adjust the system and get back on track today.
That approach reinforces the positive identity of a resilient, problem-solving, healthy person. It separates the action missing the workout from the identity of being a healthy person.
And this resilient approach is underpinned by a principle we touched on earlier, but it needs massive emphasis because it counteracts that trap of unrealistic expectations. Consistency beats intensity.
This is such a crucial detail for the listener who thinks they have to go from 0 to 60 immediately.
Think about the cumulative effect. A grueling, high-intensity 2-hour workout that you do once a month leaves you exhausted, burnt out, and dreading the next session. It just depletes your willpower and reinforces a negative psychological association with exercise.
But doing a manageable 30-minute workout 3 times a week requires way less willpower. It reinforces the habit repeatedly, and it accrues far more progress over a year.
The consistent, manageable effort reinforces the habit and the identity without draining that willpower battery. It's about building a solid foundation through frequency, not testing your physical and mental limits through sporadic maximum effort.
And that leads us right to the core of this section. Discipline is built through robust systems, not fragile motivation.
The system is the blueprint for behavior for when motivation is absent. We have to stop waiting for inspiration and instead create the environment where success is the easiest, most automated path.
Let's dive deep into the practical mental tools the book introduces for building these self-sustaining systems, starting with habit stacking.
Habit stacking is a genius idea. It's about anchoring a new desired habit to an existing routine that you already do automatically. For anyone listening, this is about leveraging existing behavioral momentum.
It removes the conscious decision-making step. You use the phrase, after I current habit, I will new habit.
And that current habit acts as the undeniable cue for the new behavior. Let's run through a few detailed examples to make this tool really actionable.
Okay, so if you're trying to improve hydration, the common example is, after I brush my teeth every morning, I will immediately fill my water bottle and drink a glass of water.
Right. But what if your goal is movement or preparation? A working parent might use this. After I finish putting the kids' lunchboxes in the fridge, I will immediately lay out my workout clothes for the next morning. The act of putting away the lunchboxes is the cue. It makes the prep for movement automatic.
Or for someone trying to cut down on screen time and read more. After I unplug my phone charger before bed, I will immediately pick up the book on my nightstand and read 1 page.
That's a perfect one. An immediate one-to-one swap. The key is that the new habit should be small and achievable enough that it doesn't trigger willpower resistance at the beginning.
The second tool is environment control, which is basically the physical manifestation of managing your triggers. This preserves those precious willpower reserves.
We talked about moving the cookies, but let's elaborate on how environment control really functions psychologically. It's about reducing friction for good habits and increasing friction for bad ones.
When you modify your surroundings, you're reducing the need to rely on that finite willpower battery.
Absolutely. If you want to start exercising, you lower the friction for that good habit by laying your gym clothes out the night before, placing your car keys next to your gym bag, having a pre-planned route. You eliminate all the mental hurdles.
And conversely, increasing friction for bad habits is just as powerful. If you struggle with binge watching TV,
you might put the TV remote in a drawer downstairs. It forces you to actively search for it.
And that small increase in friction, the minute or two of searching, provides a critical pause.
And that pause gives your rational brain a chance to intervene before the impulsive behavior takes over. You're outsourcing your willpower management to your physical environment.
Okay, the third key tool is progress tracking. But we already established that tracking weight alone is often a vanity metric that just leads to frustration. The focus has to be on tracking adherence to systems and identity goals.
This is a fundamental shift in perspective. If your ultimate goal is lose 20 pounds, you're only tracking the outcome, which is highly susceptible to external variables, hormones, water retention, digestion.
Right, which leads to those wildly fluctuating and frustrating readings on the scale.
But if your goal is instead be a consistent person who executes their system 80% of the time, then you track your adherence to that system.
That's the controllable metric.
Exactly. Did I track my food today? Did I move for 30 minutes? Did I drink my target amount of water? It's a yes or no. Tracking adherence reinforces the positive identity, regardless of what the scale says today. Tracking what you do, the input, is infinitely more empowering than tracking the outcome, the output, which often lags and is outside of your moment-to-moment control.
Now, we have to address the reality that even with the best systems and the best identity, things will go wrong. Life happens. This is where key lesson 3 comes in. Progress is not linear.
This is so critical for counteracting that all-or-nothing trap we discussed at the start. Keane teaches the necessity of understanding that setbacks are inevitable components of growth, not conclusive proof of failure.
We tend to imagine progress as a straight line going up.
But in reality, it's a meandering path with plateaus, sharp dips, and even moments of apparent regression.
So if I'm the listener and I miss 4 days at the gym because of a business trip, the person trapped in that failure loop interprets that as a reason to quit. The inner voice says, "You've ruined the streak, just start again next month."
But the person operating under the fitness mindset frames mistakes as invaluable data points, not reasons to quit. A setback is merely information that requires an adjustment to the system. The question isn't, why am I failing? The question is, what did this disruption teach me about my current system's resilience?
And that allows you to remove the emotional, moral judgment entirely and just turn it into a mechanical problem to be solved.
Yes.
If the business trip broke my system, maybe my system needs a low-friction travel routine built into it, even if it's just 15 minutes of stretching in the hotel room.
Exactly. This reframing of mistakes as data points is arguably the most powerful tool for long-term commitment. It replaces self-criticism with self-correction, and that enables continuous commitment without the exhausting shame spiral.
So these tools, habit stacking, environment control, tracking adherence, and reframing setbacks, they collectively replace our dependency on willpower. They create the self-sustaining system required for long-term success.
You're training the mind to automate positive behavior, which frees up that limited willpower for more difficult decisions in other areas of your life.
Which brings us to the ultimate destination. This whole psychological framework lets us finally shift our focus to the ultimate goal, long-term fitness as a lifestyle.
Yes, fitness should support your life, not dominate it or become another massive source of stress.
That ultimately is the sustainability test. If achieving a specific fitness goal requires you to sacrifice your mental peace, abandon your social life, and makes you fundamentally unhappy,
you haven't really succeeded. You've just traded one set of problems for another. The system has to integrate, not overwhelm.
And Keane promotes several practical components that support this integration, starting with flexible dieting. This is the direct psychological answer to the failure of extreme, rigid diets.
So how does flexible dieting actually inoculate you against that destructive all-or-nothing trap?
Well, it operates under the premise that sustainability requires you to enjoy food, social occasions, and occasional indulgences without feeling that moral condemnation.
The 80-20 rule.
Exactly. It's often called the 80-20 rule. The goal is to hit your overall nutritional targets most of the time, that's the 80%, which allows for the necessary flexibility, the 20%, to participate in life and enjoy food.
So if I consciously plan for a higher calorie meal on Saturday night with friends, I can enjoy it without guilt because it's already accounted for within my system. That prevents the feeling of the day being ruined, which would trigger a 4-day crash.
Precisely. It allows for controlled deviation. It turns that Saturday night meal from a crisis of willpower into a planned event, which requires zero emotional energy. It teaches moderation and balance, the two things extreme diets actively prevent.
He also stresses enjoyable training. This sounds so obvious, but
so many people stick to plans they dread because they think they should be doing them. If you hate running, forcing yourself to run every day is a guaranteed path to quitting.
training needs to be manageable enough to ensure consistency, but enjoyable enough that it actually reinforces the habit, rather than being seen as a punishment or an obligation.
The type of exercise is really secondary to the fact that you consistently do it.
It goes right back to reinforcing the identity of a person who moves, not necessarily a person who follows a specific painful workout regimen. That emotional connection is deeply important for adherence.
And finally, the ultimate umbrella concept. Balance over obsession. Preventing fitness from becoming yet another major stressor in an already full life.
And this brings us to key lesson 5, which is really the defining insight of the book. Sustainability is the real measure of success. If the plan requires unsustainable levels of effort or willpower or social isolation, it has to be refined.
The critical insight is that the goal isn't to be the fittest person in the room for 6 weeks.
The goal is to be a consistently healthy person for 60 years.
That completely reframes what success even is. Short-term physical appearance becomes way less important than the long-term adherence to the system. It's a measure of mental resilience, not just peak physical condition.
Now, it is important to acknowledge the book's limitations, as the source analysis mentioned, to give a full picture for our listener. We need to understand what this book isn't.
Right. It's not a textbook for hypertrophy or a complex guide to keto. It's less focused on detailed workout plans, specific set and rep schemes, or strict day-by-day diet rules. It is fundamentally a mental manual.
Exactly. So readers expecting a comprehensive fitness manual might find it too flexible, or even lacking in specific tactical instruction. But that flexibility is its unique strength.
Because it forces the reader to focus on the why, the mental and behavioral architecture, before they even get to the what.
And if you have the right mindset, the tactics are interchangeable.
The public reception really validates this prioritization, especially for people who felt lost in the complexity of traditional advice. It was praised for its honesty and realism. It deals with the messy reality of habit formation.
And crucially, it was loved by the audience that needed it most. People who had failed multiple diets before. That audience, the chronic dieter, the person stuck in the loop, they found immense value in the diagnosis and the practical identity-based solutions.
The review noting, feels like a coach talking, not selling, perfectly captures the tone. It's encouraging, pragmatic, and focused on self-efficacy.
It really is.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've learned that the body follows where the mind leads. Lasting change requires adopting a fundamental identity and building supportive, low-friction systems, not relying on sheer willpower or temporary spikes of motivation.
That is the core learning. We started by dismantling that failure loop, the all-or-nothing trap, the reliance on fleeting motivation, the use of food for emotional management. Then we established that the focus has to shift entirely from what program should I follow to that fundamental life-changing question.
What kind of person do I need to become? We analyze the practical tools, from habit stacking and environment control to reframing setbacks, that automate positive behavior and replace that dependence on finite willpower. And we establish that consistency, flexibility, and balance are the ultimate measures of success, far outpacing short-term intensity.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Who is this psychological guide really designed for?
Well, the analysis clearly identifies the target audience, people stuck in chronic diet cycles, beginners who are just confused by the sheer volume of conflicting fitness advice, and most importantly, anyone who realizes that quick fixes are illusions and wants lasting results, permanent behavior change, and a healthy relationship with their body.
My final verdict remains strong. The fitness mindset is a powerful, realistic, and mentally refreshing approach. The defining insight is the connection between self-awareness and sustainable action. If you've ever found yourself saying, I know what to do, but I don't do it, this framework offers the solution. It focuses on the doing by fundamentally fixing the thinking and building automated systems.
It shifts the entire battlefield from the refrigerator and the gym floor to the 2 inches between your ears. The battle for the body is won or lost long before you even lace up your shoes.
And this leads to a powerful, final, provocative thought for you to mull over as you integrate these ideas. The entire premise of this book shifts success from external metrics weight lost, a certain aesthetic, to internal metrics like consistency and identity adherence. So if the definition of a setback is simply data for adjustment rather than a reason to quit, how would that single shift change your approach to every single challenging goal in your life? Your career, your relationships, your learning path, not just your fitness.
If mistakes are just data, then truly failing becomes impossible, only learning.
Think about that.
A profound shift in perspective. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.